Welcome back to OpenMed School. Today I'll be discussing the various designs in research, and this is one of the fundamental topics in epidemiology. So let us start. The study designs in epidemiology. It can be mainly divided into two types. One is observational studies, and other is the experimental studies, about which we'll be discussing today. So let us look into the what is meant by observational study. In observational study, the investigator doesn't interfere. He just observe what is happening. That is what is meant by observation study. So here exposure and disease occurs naturally. So suppose somebody is exposed to something, no interference, and we'll be studying the outcome. So what is naturally happening, that is being studied. That is only observational. And the observation studies can be divided two types. One is the one just describing, that is a descriptive study, and second is you are doing some analysis, that is called an analytical study. So I will repeat once more. You are dividing the studies into observation studies and experimental studies. Observation studies are again divided into one just description alone, that is descriptive study, and when you are making some analysis, that is called an analytical study or observational analytical study. Now we go into little more details into the observation study. So in observational descriptive study, you describe the distribution of the disease, and the answer will be who, where, when. Hope it is clear. Does not test the cause and effect. You are just only describing what is happening. How many patients or how many of the population is having diabetes. So that you are just only observing how many are having diabetes. So examples of descriptive studies. There are different types. One is simple case report. In many journals you see, you are describing a particular case, a rare case you are describing. Second is a case series, around 10 cases. You are putting it as a case series. And more important, routinely done is the cross-sectional survey for identifying the prevalence or estimating the prevalence. So, what are the types of observation study? Observation studies can be a case report, it can be a case series, or a cross-sectional study. In cross-section studies, we are taking a snap of what is happening. So now we are going into the what are the types of analytical studies. That is observational, but there is some analysis. Here you are testing relationship between exposure and disease. That is important. There is you are analyzing the relationship between exposure and the outcome. So usually there are two groups. So there will be a comparison group will be there. And it will help to identify the risk factors. We'll discuss in detail. So what are the examples? There are two types. One is the case control, and second is the cohort study. These are two examples of observational analytical studies. So what is a case control? Case control starts with the patient. So for example, somebody has developed a bronchogenic carcinoma, carcinoma. So that is from where you're starting and you are looking back. What is the risk factor? For example, you're looking whether smoking is causing. So you can say it is a retrospective study. So case control studies are retrospective. That is from outcome, you are going back to exposure. So it looks backwards to identify the exposure. Example, as mentioned, smoking history in lung cancer patients. And this is usually used for rare cases. For example, the cases are number is less then only. So these 2 points you remember. This is a retrospective study. Why it is retrospective? Because the outcome has occurred, and then you are studying what are the or what is causing it. So this point is clear. And second is the cohort study. Cohort study begins with the exposure. So somebody is exposed or population is exposed. You follow the participants over time. Example, smoking. There are smokers, there are non-smokers. Then you are observing the patient or the population over time and looking for the outcome. So what is the outcome? Outcome is development of a bronchogenic carcinoma. So you are following up the patients over time, as mentioned, smokers versus non-smokers. So there is a comparison group also. So here is a cohort study is a type of observational. At the same time, it is an analytical study. So another is the cross-sectional analytic study. So in a cross-sectional study, your exposure and disease are measured at the same time. So in a survey, cross-sectional study, say survey where the exposure and disease or the outcome is measured at the same time. Example, you are looking for the physical inactivity and obesity. When you are studying this in a population, as a cross-section study, you are finding out how many people are sedentary and how many people are having obesity. So outcome and the exposures are for the exposure for the disease are measured at the same time. So that is a cross-sectional analytical study. Now we go to the experimental studies. These are where some intervention is done. Researcher introduces some intervention and participants are assigned to different groups. Some are given some having some intervention, others are having no intervention. Example is a trial of a new antihypertensive drug. It is a interventional study or an experimental study. So the classical one is the randomized controlled trial. So participants are here randomly assigned. So there is an intervention group and a control group. It's the strongest evidence. So for undergoing or taking up a randomized controlled trial, there are a lot of steps are there. Details will be discussed in the other sections. RCTs minimize the bias. About the bias, again, we will discuss later. And it provides the strongest evidence. So in summary, the study designs can be divided into descriptive and for observational and experimental. Observational are divided into descriptive and analytical. So in an analytical study, you test the association. For example, smoking with the bronchogenic carcinoma. In descriptive study, you are just observing who, when, what, where, etc. There is no intervention, no analysis, no intervention. The experimental study, say, intervention is there. So this is the pyramid. So this is a observational descriptive study. What are the things which comes under it? Case series, case reports, surveys, all these comes under. Then comes the observational analytical study. We can here there is some hypothesis is there. So remember, hypothesis testing occurs only in analytical study. So the case control study and cohort studies are classical examples. Then experimental study, the classical one is an intervention, the drug trial. Hope you understood the various study designs. Stay tuned for further videos. Thank you.